Happy Friday, everyone. John Lorden here with another episode of BrainScratch. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we get started on today's case, I want to let you know about a special project I've been working on. It's finally come together. I've been teasing it for a while. You guys have been asking for it for much longer than that. Finally, a podcast. I'm working with Danielle Hallen, and the name of the podcast is Crime After Crime. It premieres on September 1st, 2018. You will find a YouTube version on a new channel, as well as audio versions, hopefully everywhere that you usually find your favorite podcasts. I still have to figure that part out. But the YouTube channel is already up and running. There's a video there where you can learn much more about the podcast and see a little sample of what it's going to look and sound like. There's a link in the description box below so you can check that out. If you head over there, please do subscribe. We want to make sure that you know when the new episodes hit. And they should be released on the 1st of every month. It is going to be a monthly podcast. I'm still working on possibly developing some other podcasts, so you might be able to follow me through a few different podcasts with different co-hosts and all kinds of stuff. But on to today's case. Several months ago, I saw a comment on a video from a cousin of Jennifer Renee Odom asking to help raise some exposure to her case. And of course, I made a note of it on my list of case suggestions. And today I was really working that list hard. I was basically starting from the top and going through, thankfully, a lot of the cases that were suggested, even up to several years ago at this point, are now turning into case cracked, which is, it was kind of a good feeling that I got from seeing that something that was an unsolved case only a year or two, or possibly 2.5, 3 years ago, was now solved in some way. And I've got a good, healthy list for case cracked episodes. But I came across this case. I saw the note from the cousin, and I decided I should probably take a real good look at this and see if there was something I can do on this case. Now, this is a case from 1993, which, quite honestly, in terms of what I typically do for internet research, it's right in that area where it's getting kind of tough to research. Anything older than the early 90s gets really difficult to research. And then, of course, the farther back you go, unless the story is insanely popular for some reason and people are still talking about it, it gets really tough. So a lot of the research we're going to look at today is actually a bit more modern, but I think we're still going to get a good sense of the story and how we can help. And quite honestly, I know last week we talked about a very current story, and I was hoping it was going to turn into a case cracked, and it kind of did the same day that I released the episode. This story might be close to having its case cracked as well. Could be a matter of months, could be a matter of weeks, or we could be back at square one. I kind of don't know for sure after going through all this, but I hope that you guys will think about that as we are talking about and looking into the story of Jennifer Renee Odom. And you can see a picture of her here. We've got several pictures of this young lady. And we're going to start this at a website. Quite honestly, I didn't even know that earthlink.net sites were still up. I think that used to be my internet provider actually back in the 90s. It looks like it's kind of a family website, but I believe this is a poem that was written by a friend of hers. It is called Goodbye, Jenny. A friend to all, always loved, always there to help someone. Once a bright and chipper child, her spirits, her humor wild, she very rarely never smiled. Skiing was her claim to fame, trophies and plaques bore her name. With or without skis, she'd glide through the gentle swaying tide. The band is where I knew her from, she'd make her clarinet beautifully hum. Through her music, she would play, ready for another day. Then one day there came a fuss. She cheerily got off the bus. She turned to wave to friends with cheer, not noticing that someone was near. Then she was taken from those held dear. The sorrow completely filled the void. Who'd have done something this cruel? Some moped as others asked why. All others could do was cry. For 6 days, cheer was low, and then there came the final blow. A 12-year-old was found dead. That is what the news said. Shock and grief filled the school. This was definitely too cruel. Things will never be the same, no matter what the people say. Wow, she's just a spirit flying high in that beautiful big blue sky. Bright and shiny as a penny, my final words, goodbye, Jenny. And I just wanted to share that with you guys because it moved me. I found it very touching, but it also gave us some insight into what this young girl was like. We know that she played clarinet. We know that she was part of the school band. We know that she was a skier, a water skier as well. So I just wanted to share that with you guys in a bit of a different way of learning a bit about Jenny. So let's move on to findingflorida.blog. This is a blog that has put together a bit of a timeline. We're going to see just kind of what happened on this day and leading up to her disappearance. Jennifer Renee Odom was a 12-year-old girl living in the small rural community of St. Joseph, located in Pasco County, Florida. The home that she resided in with her mom, dad, and younger sister sat on 15 acres and was surrounded by a small, tight-knit community. And here we have some pictures. Her younger sister's name is Jessica. So let's get to the timeline. This is in 1993, February 19th, 3 p.m. Jennifer gets off her school bus located at the intersection of Jessamine and Jim Denny Roads, waves to friends, and begins to walk the 200 yards from the bus stop to her house. She never made it home. Friends on the bus later report seeing an older, faded blue pickup truck stopped on the side of the road nearby and stated that the truck began slowly creeping in the same direction that Jennifer was walking. It's the last time she's seen alive. 4 p.m., Jennifer's younger sister, Jessica, arrives home on a separate bus and can't get inside of the house. Thinking her big sister is playing a trick on her, as they often did to each other, she walks down the road to their grandmother's house to get a key, returning a short time later. Looking around, she quickly determines that Jennifer is not inside. Confused and a little panicked, she contacts one or both parents at work to alert them. From information I've seen, the mother is certainly contacted, and I think that's why she wrote or both parents, because she's not sure if the father might have been contacted at that point as well. Approximately 5 p.m., Jennifer's parents arrive home and begin calling friends to see if anyone had seen her. Hearing that she had last been seen walking toward home, they immediately notify local authorities of their daughter's disappearance. Police begin investigating the disappearance. The close-knit community of St. Joseph rallies together to assist in the search for Jennifer, with hundreds of volunteers showing up to try and locate the missing 12-year-old honors student. February 25th, a couple searching an abandoned orange grove in southeast Hernando County find Jennifer's body. She's found just 10 miles from home. It would later be released that her cause of death is blunt force trauma of the head and that she had been sexually assaulted. Her clothing was missing, as were her backpack, jacket, and clarinet case. Also her purse. And Web Sleuths has a thread that's been going on literally for years about this case. And there's a lot of conversation that's happening over there about how many items she was carrying and the fact that if she was abducted, why weren't those items dropped? If she was just grabbed, she's got a clarinet case, she has a backpack, she has a purse. So we've got 3 items there. It was probably a bit of a tough load even for her just to handle that. So part of the theory that's being kicked around there is that she might have known the person, or the person might have tricked her in some way, thinking that they were friendly or being helpful to her to get her into the vehicle. And there's a lot of conversation about the blue truck as well. What's interesting is we have numerous kids that are on the school bus. They see the blue truck, but really knowing if the truck is connected to the case or not is still a bit of a question. Obviously, police went with the blue truck theory and started searching blue trucks everywhere. Nothing really came up out of that. I personally have trouble thinking it's not involved, because you're talking about an area where there's farms and there's homes, but it's really spread out in terms of land. I just don't know how much regular traffic would have been happening on that type of road. And I don't know. I really have trouble thinking that the truck is not involved in this case, but that's just where I'm at it. Let's go ahead and move forward. At findagrave.com, they have a memorial page for Jennifer here, and we get a little more detail about that truck. An old, faded blue pickup truck slowly followed behind her. It had silver-painted rear bumper, not chrome, a trailer hitch with wires hanging, and pipes or a ladder on the back. Now, the trailer hitch with the wires hanging, obviously those would be wires that you hang up, that you hook up for the brake lights on a trailer. I've also heard that it could be a GMC. I've heard that it could be a pickup truck or it could be a flatbed truck. Bit of a difference there, and I'm kind of surprised that we don't have a better description from the kids that did see it, if it was truly a pickup truck or a flatbed, sorry. And in terms of the pipes or ladder in the back, a lot of people are wondering, does that give us some indication of what type of worker this was? Obviously, there's a lot of orange orchards at this time period, and there still are a few out there, but at this time in particular, there was even more. We know that her home actually has an orange orchard that she had to walk by. Let me bring up this map, and this is just a hand-drawn quick map from a user called Scully on Web Sleuths. And you can see she's got the bus kind of here. You've got this road that is 200 yards according to most of the news stories. There were some people on Web Sleuths that were looking at it and saying, I think it's more. Some people estimate it could be up to 600 yards. Keep in mind, this is a property that has 15 acres. Sounds like her grandmother lives somewhere very close, if not on the same actual piece of land. But you can see that Scully even depicted the orange grove here. So for someone to have a ladder in the back of their truck, particularly if they worked with picking fruit or treating the trees in some way, would certainly make a lot of sense. Obviously, probably construction oriented in some way, if it is pipes or a ladder in either direction. But that's kind of some of the best clues we have in terms of trying to understand who this person might be. She's lovingly remembered by her parents, Clark and Renee Converse, a sister, Jessica Ann Odom Converse, and grandparents, Jim and Margie Denny. So Hernando Sheriff is actually the neighboring county from where she lived, and this is the county where her body was found. So they are kind of taking the lead on this investigation, and they put a page together here where we can get some more detail about what happened. Law enforcement equipped with police dogs and hundreds of volunteers scoured 60 square miles of rolling groves, pastures, and woods surrounding the tiny Pasco town of Dade City. On Thursday, February 25th, 1993, a man and woman searching an abandoned orange grove in southeast Hernando County, Florida, found Jennifer. Jennifer's clothing, including the red sweater and Hooters jacket, have not been found. And I was kind of questioning at first because I didn't really think that Hooters was all that popular back then, but I was living in California and I don't know where Hooters originated. But yeah, it is actually the Hooters wing restaurant. And some people have been kind of critical about that. Like, why is a girl this young wearing, a Hooters sweatshirt? I saw a comment from someone on Web Sleuths that was living in the area at the time, and they talked about the fact that Hooters was not seen as some type of risque place. It didn't quite have, we have a lot of kind of comedy that's been written about Hooters nowadays. I mean, there's practically a whole episode of South Park about it. But they're talking about Hooters within their community, and it was just a place where families would go and they have kids' meals, and the meals are served on, orange Frisbees. So the kids get a free toy out of it and all that. So I know some people are probably going to have the same reservation I did when I initially heard that. First of all, I doubted it. I was like, Hooters? I must be reading about the wrong case. But here we see at hernandosheriff.org, they have a picture of it, and I know this picture is really tiny. Let me see if I can just try to increase this page a little for you. And it is indeed a Hooters branded sweatshirt with Hooters actually written on the sleeve. On top of that, they have a picture of the purse that she was carrying and the boots that she was wearing as well. Jennifer was last seen wearing a white zip-up Hooters sweat jacket with orange lettering on the left sleeve, a red long-sleeve pullover sweater, possibly cashmere or angora, a white turtleneck shirt, white denim pants, and black lace-up style boots. And they still have contact information for the detective that's working the case. Of course, I'm going to have that in the description box below for anyone that might have some information about this case. So hopefully we can get someone to call in some tips on this. This is one of those cases where I really feel like, especially with how much time has passed, someone has to have heard something somewhere, and we need those tips called in. Over to dailymail.co.uk. They did kind of a whole write-up on this, but we're just going to hit a couple points. Investigators identified the girl by her gold chain with a half-heart charm that said best friends and through fingerprints. That's something that's interesting. She is found without her clothes. She's found without her personal items. However, her jewelry was still on. She had her necklace on as well as 2 gold rings. It's weird because when I think about why is someone taking the clothes, I think there's kind of 2 thoughts that pop up. Either someone's taking the clothes because they're thinking it's some type of bizarre keepsake for what they've done to this poor girl, or they're thinking about being traced and trying to limit how much evidence they're leaving behind. But it's still kind of weird to me, especially if you consider it from the keepsake angle. Why are they going to leave her jewelry behind? That's probably a bit more personal to her than her clothing. So I'm not positive that it's really the keepsake angle. Jennifer's mother and stepfather didn't view the body. I imagine that was a really, really tough decision to come to. And I know some people handle that situation differently. Some people want to keep their memories of while their lost loved one was alive. So I understand that that's a very personal decision, and some people are going to take a left and some people are going to take a right on that. 2 years later, Jennifer's book bag and clarinet were found in a trash pile in the woods 30 miles from her home and 18 miles from where her body was found. At the time, investigators said the way those items were concealed suggested the killer was local and familiar with back roads and out-of-the-way places to hide things. Back to a map, once again put together by Scully over at Web Sleuths, who's literally spent years working on this case on Web Sleuths, and my hat is definitely off to them. Also, for another reason we're going to touch on by the end of this episode, which I'm completely impressed by. But here we have a map. I believe point A is where her home is. They've got the date there, February 19th, 1993. This star is where her body was found, February 25th, and I believe that's about 11 miles away. And then over here is where and it's interesting, they're saying case. I've heard that it was the clarinet case that was found and the backpack, and that the clarinet was actually found. I don't know if it was found at the same time or if it was found separate or it was found later, but I do believe all 3 of those items were found, and it was in a trash pile. Now, not necessarily an official dump, but an area where people had begun dumping a lot of stuff, and it kind of turned into a dump for, people that don't want to pay to take things to the real one. So we can see it's quite a bit of distance here, and I'm curious why they didn't find the clothing here. I mean, if he thought it was a safe place to drop off something like her backpack, which had a book in it that had her name literally written on that book, I don't get why he wouldn't have thought that wasn't the right place to also drop off the clothing. Or possibly the clothing was dropped off as well, moved later or destroyed in some way. I'm really not sure. But we can see here that, it's kind of interesting. And this location where her body's found is another orange orchard. It has a bit of a path or a trail for riding horses that goes through it as well. But it does kind of occur to me, one thing that's really sticking out is just seeing, there's orange orchards at her home location. Kids think they see a ladder on the back of this truck. She's left in another location that is in orange orchards. Could this possibly be a field worker of some type, someone that was either picking fruit or servicing those trees? I do think that that's a possibility. It could be a strong possibility in this case. But this location where her things are dumped could also, once again, push us back more into that construction-minded person, someone that might work on home demo or something like that, and they wind up with a bunch of drywall and busted up wood that they have to dump somewhere, and they just take it behind a hospital, actually is what's over here, Oak Hill Hospital. That's why that's written here. Take it out back behind there and just, add it to this kind of community dump that is started back there. So I can certainly understand why police think that this is someone that is either a local or has a lot of knowledge of that area. Could be someone that works in that area. Over at TampaBay.com, we're now jumping forward pretty serious in time. This was published on February 12th, 2013. Essentially, there was a bit of a renewed interest that happened kind of leading right up to the 20th anniversary. And that's not to say that it wasn't being worked on. From the information I'm seeing, this case was worked on fairly consistently. It did officially turn into a cold case, but it seems like there was constantly resources being put towards it. I have to tell you guys that the amount of work that I've seen in terms of what law enforcement has done to try to solve this case is pretty impressive. It's one of the biggest cases that I've heard of in terms of its sheer paper count, how many persons of interest they wound up looking into. I mean, it seems like they were doing everything they possibly could to close this case. And we're not there yet. Are we possibly close? Maybe we'll get to that by the end. Renee Converse picked up the phone and heard the voice of the man hunting her daughter's killer. Detective James Boylan had some encouraging news. Hernando Sheriff Al Nienhuis had assigned an additional detective to work full-time on the unsolved murder of her daughter. 1 week shy of the 20th anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance, Nienhuis announced that Detective John Ellis will spend the next year combing through dozens of binders and hundreds of pieces of evidence to try to break the 20-year-old case. On top of that, there was a few citizens that donated their time and basically went through the case file starting from the first page and just processing it all the way through. So a lot of people trying to pitch in to help on this. Investigators have tried various methods of generating new leads, from billboards and a $20,000 reward to an appearance in 1994 on NBC's Unsolved Mysteries. In 2007, members of Hernando County Crime Stoppers handed out special playing cards to inmates at the Hernando County Detention Center. Each card featured a brief description of an unsolved case from around the state and a hotline number. Jennifer's card was the Queen of Diamonds and featured 2 color photos. One showed the Hooters sweatshirt she was wearing that was never found. The other showed her book bag discovered in 1995, along with her clarinet case, on a dirt road about 12 miles west of where her body was discovered. These efforts have led to thousands of tips and some promising leads, but no arrests. Nienhuis said Tuesday that his agency is no closer to solving the murder. He acknowledged Jennifer's killer may never be found, but new technology developed over the past 2 decades might help, the sheriff said. So too could the passage of time. Now, of course, when I hear that, I start thinking DNA. And is there some possibility that they're going to find some type of DNA in this case? Or have they already and we don't know about it? I can tell you guys at this point, I'm really not sure that they have DNA. I'm curious if there might be things that they can do with the evidence that was found at this point to try to extract DNA, because obviously things are always changing in terms of what types of DNA or the methods that they could collect DNA. Let me be more clear about that. For example, like touch DNA. And I didn't mention it, but on one of the items that was found, there was a fingerprint that was found that didn't match the people that had found the item. It didn't match Jennifer or her family. That fingerprint was run. They couldn't find any matches to it. But I'm wondering if maybe something like a touch DNA analysis could be done on that at this point. I'm really not sure for myself, but hopeful. Renee and her husband, Clark Converse, still live in the same home on Jim Denny Road, named after Renee's father. She's a technology help desk manager for Pasco County government. Clark runs the family's tree service business. They eventually removed the bed from Jennifer's bedroom to make space for an exercise machine and a treadmill, but her bookshelves and bulletin board full of photos are still there. So is her beloved blue beanbag chair. Renee says that Jennifer would have been proud of Jessica, now 29 and about to finish the registered nurse program at Pasco Hernando Community College. Jessica's 4-year-old daughter, Emma, sometimes asks about the brown-haired, brown-eyed girl she sees in photos. That's your Aunt Jenny, her family replies. So what about this Unsolved Mysteries appearance? From what I can tell, it actually wound up in an episode about psychics. And you guys know I'm a bit skeptical about the help of psychics. This case sounds pretty interesting to me in terms of what the psychic did. So let's read a brief synopsis of it over at unsolvedmysteries.wikia.com. After a series of dead ends, the police called upon psychic Nancy Meyer 16 months after the murder to try and identify Jennifer's killers. She believes that Jennifer's killers asked her for directions and then abducted her. While taken to the site where her body was found, Nancy noted that she was not killed there. She accurately described some of Jennifer's belongings that were found nearby. She also pointed out there were more of her belongings in a nearby area that had not yet been discovered. Now, admittedly, I'm skeptical about this type of information, but according to the information I've heard from the medical examination, I don't think that they've really raised any question that that is the location that she died at. I think they're pretty solid that that's actually where she died from blunt force trauma. Outside of that, saying that, yeah, there's more of her belongings you guys haven't found nearby. I mean, it was kind of common public knowledge at that point, just with the articles that I've seen. So nothing real special to that for me. And this is where my questions about psychics really just kind of peg me in the head over and over. It'd be totally different if she was like, hey, you guys didn't find her sweater, and by the way, you need to go look in that direction, and there's three trees in a cluster with 2 rocks under. I mean, some type of description of where these items are. But saying that, oh yeah, you guys haven't found anything yet, I could say that about any unsolved case, period. I could literally say that about any unsolved case. So I don't know, that doesn't really get me. This next part is pretty interesting. She was able to describe several of Jennifer's items that were discarded by the killers, including her cousin's clarinet case with the letters LO on them. These items were located 2 years after the murder. She continues to give information about the killers in hopes of solving the case. And here there's just a little touch on suspected serial killer Frank T. Potts as a possible suspect in this case. I think this is literally the only place that I've seen any mention of him being possibly related to this case. As I was researching this case, it seemed pretty common that there was a different suspect or person of interest that was being looked at throughout the years here. Let's jump over to TampaBay.com. And we hear about a development that happened in June of 2013. FBI officials and local authorities converged on a picturesque street Tuesday, chasing a lead in the 20-year-old unsolved murder of the 12-year-old girl. It led them into the waters of Lake Jovita, where dive teams spent the day in boats and under tarps. It ended with no major announcements except that investigators were searching for a vehicle. I'd bet that we're talking about a certain blue truck. Hernando Sheriff Al Ninehuis cautioned that the lead was just one of hundreds received in the notorious case. Quote, "We have been working several different angles on this case since I assigned a detective full-time to this investigation. We are, of course, hopeful that this is the break in the case that we have been waiting for." So what happened with the water search? Let's jump over to Fox 13 News. As years passed, new leads turned into dead ends. Back in 2006, Hernando investigators announced they were getting help from the FBI to re-examine forensic evidence. They said they had narrowed the group of suspects and developed a profile of Jennifer's killer. Playing cards with Jennifer's case information were even distributed in jails in hopes of finally getting the tip detectives were waiting for. Back in June of 2013, many thought the sheriff's office finally had a break in the murder case. Neighbors anxiously watched as a dive team spent 2 days searching a body of water near Lake Jovita. Once again, that tip turned up nothing. Now, I did hear about another instance where someone had mentioned possibly handling some of her other items and that they might have thrown them in a lake. I don't know if this is that same search. I think that's a different location, but I just wanted to mention that as well. And quite honestly, that wasn't from a news source that I got that info, so take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But and now we get to 2018, and this is back at TampaBay.com. After 25 years, a mother's grief and questions remain. And here we see a picture of Jennifer's mother, Renee. A quarter century after the murder of Jennifer Odom, her mother remembers how much she loved her Springer Spaniel, Gypsy, and how she giggled with a gang of girlfriends while dressing up for a middle school dance. 6 days after she disappeared in 1993, detectives located Jennifer's body. Since then, they have amassed nearly 1,000 pieces of evidence, taken thousands of tips, done hundreds of interviews, building a case file 75,000 pages thick. And I've actually seen some video interviews with the detective currently on it. He's now estimating that it's up to over 80,000 pages thick. They literally have a room that is just bookshelves, and it's just filled with case files. They've questioned nearly 100 people of interest. Still nothing. Quote, "I think they would have done anything in the world to have solved this case," Renee said, including the current lead detective. He's very hopeful that he is going to be able to find the missing piece that is going to pull all of this together and help us find a resolution with Jennifer and who did this to her. And this is actually a picture of him here, George Lloyd Grin. He's a former New York cop that has moved to this area and has been detective on this case for a number of years now. The rural neighborhood where Renee and her husband Clark settled was dotted with orange groves and occupied mostly by extended family. It was a playground for Jennifer and Jessica, as much friends as sisters. Together, they built forts, rode four-wheelers, and spent summer days swimming in the creek behind their house. Full of life is how Renee remembers Jennifer, a seventh grader. She was a barefoot water skier, once rated the seventh best in the country for her age. Again and again, Jennifer placed in tournaments. Often, she was the skier who climbed on top of the human pyramid, gliding atop the water. 3 days before she disappeared, Jennifer marched with the Thomas E. Waitman Middle School Band, playing the clarinet. The mother of two outgoing girls, Renee said she taught them how to stay safe if they encountered trouble on their walk home, how to spot the, quote, dangers of life. "Zigzag the grove," she told them. "I can find you in the orange grove." I've actually seen a few different comments from her about what she told her kids, and a possible reason for this. There was some neighbors that had lived close to them, and I guess Jennifer used to get off the bus with these neighbor kids, but they moved away just a matter of weeks before her disappearance. I think that might have been a factor in prompting this conversation, but I've seen comments from other family members where it just seems like, Renee was just very cautious in this way and just spoke to her girls regularly about what to do. But one of the interesting things that she told them on top of this about zigzagging the orange grove is to drop their books. And once again, that brings us back to the question that we were touching on at the start of this video. Why did Jennifer not have any items left behind? And quite honestly, that could also lead us to another question of, is this more than one person that did this? Is it possible one guy grabs her, she drops a few things, another guy grabs those things, they get into this truck, that way one person can drive while the other person's restraining her? I don't know. Couple of photos I want to show you that they have here. This location is actually where they found the backpack that had a book in it with her name written on the inside front cover of the book, and the clarinet case found in this location out here. And it was found by people that were looking for scrap metal. They have a picture here of cops checking a blue truck, and apparently they did a lot of this in the days around her disappearance, just looking for any sign that that truck could be involved in her disappearance. Here we see tearful classmates and friends of Jennifer gathering around her coffin to say goodbye. Really, really just horrible, horrible thing to think of a community going through like this. And this kind of inspirational, 2 weeks after Jennifer was found murdered, more than 100 seventh graders at River Ridge Middle School gathered to send a message to students at Waitman Middle School. And they took this picture where they joined hands, made a giant heart around the words, "We care." And here we have a couple photos of where her remains were found, including kind of a top-down photo, so you get a bit of a sense. You can see there is a trail that's kind of running through these trees here. A former New York City detective, George Lloyd Grin, came to work for the Hernando County Sheriff's Office in 2005. It wasn't long until he heard about Jennifer. She was the talk of the agency, he said, and still, anywhere you go and you mention her name, people's heads snap and turn right away. When Lloyd Grin, 54, became head of the cold case division in 2014, he walked into the woods to see where Jennifer's body was found. He's returned to that spot at the base of an orange tree about a half dozen times since. When he went back last month, the tree bore a single fruit. Lloyd Grin believes Jennifer's killer is familiar with where she lived and where she was found. Maybe it was someone who became infatuated with her, he said, or maybe it was just a crime of opportunity. The sheriff's office has multiple people of interest, he said, some that might be a little more interesting than others. I'm really not positive how much I buy the crime of opportunity thought around this. It's not like a city street where, there's passerbys constantly coming and going. And, I was watching these horrible videos on a television show the other day of children just being grabbed from like literally stores, people walking by a store, and all of a sudden someone just reaches in and grabs a toddler and tries to run off with them. In this area in particular, just looking at the area and seeing there's so much land out there. There's not a lot of reason for a lot of vehicles to be driving in that particular area. So it kind of occurs to me this could be someone that knew her pattern for some reason. And think about this window, this perfect window of being there just exactly at that time with a girl that is athletic, could probably run to that house and be there in a matter of seconds. And her sister doesn't come home for an hour after that. Her parents don't come home until 30 to 60 minutes after that. It seems to me like this is someone that was either watching and knew the pattern, or I don't know. I really have trouble thinking they just got lucky and just happened to be there and saw this little girl walking alone. It's too coincidental for this type of area. At least from what I understand about it. Admittedly, I don't live there. I've never even been there. I'm looking at this through photos and video clips and maps and trying to get a sense out of it. It's just I'm struggling with that aspect a little bit. And back to Jennifer's mother, Renee. Time has taught Renee how to get through each day accepting what happened, but her grief remains real. She thinks of her daughter daily. Somebody robbed us of her, robbed the world of her, Renee said. Finding that individual will make it so nobody else gets hurt, but she can't come back. I'll never have her again. And that's one of the things I'm kind of worried about with this case as well, is we're talking 25 years later. There's some chance this person might not even be alive, could be alive, could be living in a different state, might have even left to another country. There's just so much possibility when you're talking about a time frame like that. But I'm still definitely hopeful that there's something that could be done in this case, obviously, because I'm here talking to you guys about it. So over at WTSP, get a little more info. Hundreds of hours of manpower have been spent working this case in the 24 years since, and now it's all in the hands of Detective Lloyd Grin. He believes the break in this case will come from someone who has firsthand knowledge of what happened. These suspects all talk. They tell a wife, a girlfriend, a brother, or they brag to somebody. Or they actually feel guilt. It bothers them. In this case in particular, I don't think it bothers that person too much. I don't know, really hard to tell, but I do believe in what he's saying. I do think this is a person that would have confided in someone at some point. And when you think about this case, is there a possibility this could be a repeat offender, someone that has done this before or has done this after this particular case? I do think that that's a very serious consideration. And that brings us to springhillnow.com, April 27th, 2017. Person of interest identified in the murder of Jennifer Odom. And here we see a picture of Jeffrey Norman Crum Sr. Authorities have announced they have finally found a person of interest, Jeffrey Norman Crum Sr. Now, I find that worded just a little strangely because we know they've had many persons of interest. There's been a bunch of names that I've seen sprinkled throughout this whole thing. Mr. Jeffrey Crum Sr. here has a particular history that is certainly troubling. Crum Sr. has been linked to another case involving the rape and beating of a 17-year-old girl back in 1992 through DNA. Eerily similar to Odom's case, the girl got off her school bus and headed down a dirt road when she was kidnapped, savagely assaulted, raped, and left for dead. DNA was gathered from the scene, but the police had no suspects until Jeffrey Norman Crum II, Crum Sr.'s son, was sentenced for an armed robbery. When Jeffrey's DNA was entered into the state's database, they got a hit on the old Pasco County case. But Jeffrey would have been in elementary school at the time, so detectives took voluntary DNA samples from his family members. His father was a DNA match for the Pasco case. It's Florida's first case relying on familial DNA. Crum was arrested and charged with attempted felony murder and sexual battery with a deadly weapon. His trial for that case is coming up, and he has already served time for sexual assault and kidnapping in another case back in 1987. Now, if you recall earlier, I said that there was something kind of amazing and impressive about web sleuths. If you read through that thread, they actually catch on to this guy at some point in 2015. And they're basically putting together that his MO seems to be a match for the Odom case as well. Very, very impressive. And we can see, obviously, law enforcement does come to that conclusion. It does seem to take a couple of years before at least they officially announce it. But there's even another twist in all this that kind of raises this possibility. This is over at rnrfonline.com, and it's from the 30th of April, 2017. Local woman says she was nearly abducted by Jennifer Odom's suspected killer. When news broke of Crum's arrest, a Spring Hill woman, who we will refer to as Jamie, says she and a friend were nearly abducted by Crum while walking on Drew Street towards her home on Kaysen Street. Jamie says she was just 14 years old in 1993 when a man in a blue pickup truck approached her and her friend and asked if they wanted a ride home. Jamie says they ran as fast as they could through a wooded area until they reached Jamie's home. Jamie told her parents, but she doesn't remember if her parents reported the incident to the sheriff's office. Jamie described a younger Crum as being unshaven and having oily hair at the time of the incident, but she could not remember a clothing description. Now, I always get a little leery when I hear about this in cases where some people are kind of coming on to a story that is this big for a local area and saying, hey, I think that guy, I'm kind of related to that story too. And I'm not sure if that's what we have here. I don't think so because obviously this woman has kept her identity secret. So it's not like she's seeking attention or trying to, sell a book or something off of this. But what we do have is a mention of a blue pickup truck. And I'm just very curious is this something that is true? Could this be something that possibly, the story kind of melded in her head as time went on and it became a blue pickup truck that also had approached her? I really have no idea. But I haven't heard that Mr. Crum, I do know that he was living in the area, but I haven't heard that he had a blue pickup truck or access to a blue pickup truck. And what I really am curious about that I haven't seen is, was he ever considered a suspect at the time? Because we do know that he was living in the area. Let me just call out the fine work of Pirate Girl 79 over at Web Sleuths, who says, I did find this from the HCSO, the Sheriff's Office website. One address listed for Crum Sr. is only 10 miles from where Jennifer's body was found. The other was only 2 miles away. And I took a look at it for myself, and she's absolutely right. So we know that he was at least in the area. I don't know if he was living at those addresses at that specific time. I'm really surprised that we haven't heard much more detail, either from law enforcement or just from some good journalists about the possibility of Jeffrey Crum here. As you can see, running a Google News search on him, we only have 3 articles come up, basically the ones tied to the original crime, and then one in April 2017 saying, is his DNA finally going to solve this Odom case? And what I'm concerned about is this is an article from April 2017. We're well over a year past that at this point. And that worries me that DNA might not be available in Jennifer's case. I really hope I'm wrong. But considering what we have happening with Parabon Nanolabs right now, with all these familial DNA matches that are going on, seeing how hard law enforcement has been working on this case, I'd be very surprised if they weren't trying to chase down those avenues if they did have a good DNA sample to work from. Maybe, we heard Parabon Nanolabs has been working on like 140 cases. Maybe this is one that's in that number. I'm seriously keeping my fingers crossed, but I did want to put this video out because if he is involved and there is no DNA, they're going to have a lot more work to do in terms of investigating this case, trying to find the pieces to connect it. And I do believe what the detective was saying. He spoke to someone. Someone out there has this information. If it's Jeffrey Crum Sr. or if it's not him, someone out there is sitting on the information to solve this case and to bring justice to this beautiful young girl that has deserved it for a few decades now. What do you think, Brain Scratchers? Is Jeffrey Crum Sr. our guy? Is this just another person on the list of persons of interest that is going to get checked off at some point and not be the right person? Do you guys think they have DNA on this case? Or possibly do they have the ability to extract it? Maybe it hasn't happened yet. Is this a scenario where maybe the test has been submitted but hasn't been run yet and it's sitting in some backlogged laboratory somewhere? I don't know. There's a lot that could be at play here. I'm just really hopeful that law enforcement continues the dedication that they've showed to this case over the past 25 years and brings this case home for this family. They really, really deserve it. Watch some video clips of her mother. It is extremely moving, and just my heart goes out to them. I know there's a lot of wonderful people working hard to solve this case, including the web sleuths community and law enforcement, but I also wanted to pull it back to the local community and share with you some things that happened very soon after she was discovered. First of all, at her school, a tree was planted in her memory. The teachers bought and placed a 2,000-pound stone in a landscape corner in the courtyard dedicated to her, and a sign at the front of the school states, "Remember Jenny, don't walk alone." At the church, along the walking path, a landscaped memorial has been erected. In San Antonio, more than half a block of landscape has been planted in her memory. In June, the North Florida Barefoot Water Ski Club sponsored a Jennifer Odom Memorial Barefoot Tournament and raised funds to give an annual $1,500 Jennifer Odom Memorial Scholarship to an American junior barefoot skier. And honestly, this is just stuff that looks like it happened that year. I'm sure the list goes on. And let me just share with you a note from, I believe this is a family member. As a tribute to Jenny, I would like to say that I think of her every morning on my way to work when I see parents waiting at the bus stops with their children. Jenny has created an awareness that unfortunately has become so necessary. She was very special, an angel on earth, but now she's our guardian angel in heaven. Melda. Really tough one, guys. These cases are some of the toughest ones for me to cover, and obviously my heart goes out to this family. Once again, I want to thank her cousin for reaching out to me and letting me know about Jenny's case, and for allowing us to share this with each other so we can all learn from it, much in the way that Melda talked about here. These cases are just, they're heartbreakers. Children trying to come home from school, go to their home, their place of safety, and just not getting there. And there's such a small window for some of those walks in terms of witnesses to be able to see something. It just makes these cases really tough. But I do really agree with the detective. I think someone's out there that has the information. If you're that person, please do the right thing. Please use the info in the description box below. Help them solve this case. Help them bring justice to this family. They deserve it. All right, everyone, let's move on to thanking some people that are keeping the channel here, keeping me going. I appreciate each and every one of you that does that. And now we're talking about people that have donated on PayPal. Jennifer Wilson, thank you so much. Jennifer has actually set up a recurring payment. I truly, truly appreciate that, Jennifer. Thank you. And we also have to thank Lamacker Designs. Thank you so much. I hope I'm saying that right. It looks like Lamacker Designs. That's what I'm sticking with. If I said it wrong, please be sure to let me know in the comments or on social media. I will definitely make it up to you and make it right. If you want to do what they did, contribute via PayPal or contribute via Patreon, you can do that at thenewlordandarts.com. And now we get to the reviews of your comments. BrainScratch comments for last week's episode, the case of the murder of Dr. Mark Houseknecht. Amber Rose, the murderer, Joseph James Pappas, is dead now. Yes, Amber, absolutely. I released an update on it yesterday. If you guys haven't caught it, be sure to check it out. It's called Mini Scratch. Just go to the channel, go to the videos tab. You'll be able to find it relatively easy. We have some details there about what actually happened. The short of it is that he was approached by police, and he basically turned a gun on himself and ended his life. And it's a little interesting because he was wearing a bulletproof vest when he did that. And even the police chief kind of spoke up and saying, you know, why, if you're going to end your own life, why are you wearing a bulletproof vest? So one theory that I brought up in the episode yesterday is possibly he was looking for getting into a shootout with police until someone took him out. But we don't know for sure, and unfortunately, we won't know the answers ever. Jay Case, thoughts on motive only. A likely trigger for this perp may have been his age. It may be that when he turned 62, he was reminded that his mother was only 62 when she passed just over 20 years ago. Jay, really good thought. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I can definitely say, you know, certain times coming by, certain times of the year makes me think about things in my past. Hitting certain ages definitely could be a trigger for something like that. And I really appreciate you giving me that thought, because I really wasn't considering that. I did hear from some other people that talked about their personal experience in terms of having family members that were going in for surgeries and didn't make it out. And it's a very hard feeling to deal with. You do look for someone to blame. Look at these cases that we cover, and in particular, when we're talking to family members or reviewing their point of view, it's just such a human thing for you to look for a cause of whatever bad thing has happened or a cause of your grief. So I certainly understand that, 20 years could have been 20 years of him really just kind of kicking himself and getting more and more angry at Dr. Houseknecht. Do I think it's right? No. Do I wish that he would have, maybe asked for some help, maybe tried to go to some counseling to work that out? Yes, absolutely. I do think there are so many other ways to deal with tough feelings like that, but unfortunately, not all of us take those steps. I also wanted to thank you guys for, there was a bit of a gun control conversation that happens around this. It's what happens nowadays. It's the times that we live in. Whenever people see an opportunity to have that conversation, they do. But outside of a few messages that seem to get just a little extreme or a little heated, I really appreciate how you guys were talking to each other about it and sharing your different points of view. It really made me think about things in terms of your considerations and see some different sides to that. And that is the best thing that I can ask for. If we are going to have that conversation, let's respect each other enough to actually have that conversation. And there's a few actual pretty good chains going on in that comment thread with that conversation. I appreciate you guys for doing that. Thank you so much. Michigan Chems, fully loaded backpack. Is that a semi-auto or fully automatic assault backpack? Fully loaded with what? More guns and ammunition, or a complete change of clothes that will throw off observers? The language used by the police puts this case into bizarro world instead of a reality where we have an accurate description of the killer and information the public can use to be of help. Michigan Chems, first of all, you made a Superman reference, so that definitely touches my heart. But outside of that, you made me think, and that's what I love best about your guys' comments. The way that's worded, the problem I have is I would say the same thing, and I don't think that I'm particularly, gun-minded or military-minded. When I'm describing something like that, I would just want to note that, hey, that backpack there was something pretty significant in there. It was a good size, whatever he was carrying in there. And in particular, because his getaway device is a bicycle, aren't you going to be sure to be lean as possible? I know I'm kind of basically echoing the same things I said in the episode, but I really appreciate your sensibility of watching for terminology like that, because I do think there is something to that. And we have to consider the source. If that's a newspaper that's talking that way, you might not be as as jump on it kind of in the way that you have. If that's a quote coming from law enforcement in particular, might be a little more sensitive about it. I certainly understand that. But I just wanted to thank you for making me think about the wording of that, and kind of there is subtext that goes on with media. And it is interesting to me that you would use a term like fully loaded backpack when you're talking about a shooter. But I'm still struggling because I don't know how else I would explain it. Stuffed backpack, I guess. There are other ways to say it for sure. Seventh Angel AD. As a former healthcare worker, I had to constantly remind myself and colleagues that we were dealing with people who are at varying degrees of stressed out and at a low point in their lives. One had to learn how to diffuse situations if they escalated toward violence. Family members and patients sometimes feel the need to lash out. It's unfortunate that it's in the direction of people offering help. I completely agree. You say it very, very well. And once again, thank you for bringing us the other side of that sensibility of realizing that people that are going to the hospital, me in particular, it's one of the last places that I ever want to be. I get extremely stressed just even being in that environment. So I really understand that. And it's kind of cool to hear that we've got a healthcare worker here that acknowledges that there's got to be some touch that is used towards this. And that touch kind of goes both ways. Next time I'm in my doctor's office, maybe I'll have a little more consideration for what type of people he's been dealing with, or, what type of experiences he's been having, trying to help people, maybe some people that don't always want to exactly help themselves. Sharon Keeley says, I'd love to watch another video regarding Lauren Agee. I can't get the injustice of it all out of my mind. So if it's getting to me, a stranger to her, Lauren's family must be living a daily nightmare with no end in sight. Definitely would be so different if treated as suspicious crime scene to begin with. It's so frustrating and heartbreaking. Such a beautiful, vibrant young life ended. It's just not fair, and justice is so long overdue. Sorry for rambling. It just really gets me, this case. Sharon, absolutely. There's a lot about that case that bothers me. Doesn't only bother me, bothers some friends of mine, including YouTuber Gray Hughes. He has been doing some more follow-ups with Sheila. You might want to go check out those as well. And I'm trying to work on a episode where Gray and Sheila come together here on my channel and we discuss that triangle and try to make sense out of all that. So I do believe we're going to have another video on the Lauren Agee case at some point in the very near future. And of course, be sure to check out Without Warning. I've been keeping up on it. Man, episode 3. Wow. You guys really need to keep up on that. A lot of, it takes you to a different level of understanding when you're listening to the private investigator and listening to her tapes and her notes and her thoughts on it. I'm really appreciating that podcast. So, and of course, don't forget Crime After Crime, September 1st, 2018. I will see you guys there, hopefully. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you back here on Monday.